Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin and for today's video I'm going to be doing a very belated video, and that is my top 5 favorites of 2019. I also have some honorable mentions, but before we get started with all of that, I want to explain a couple of things. The first being why this video is so late. It took me a long time to get settled back and to kind of gather my thoughts and want to film this video. Not that I didn't ever want to film this video, I just wasn't in the right mood to do it. I don't know, it wasn't ever what I wanted to film when I had time to film, so I filmed other things. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is why I only picked 5. I read 83 books in the year of 2019, and quantity-wise, it was amazing. Quality-wise, 2019 was not great. I think partly because of my depression, I just felt really detached from just about everything, books included, as well as like characters and everything, so it was really hard for me to feel so strongly as I have with past favorite books. And that was really annoying for me because I wanted to love so many things and I just didn't feel that, and it was beyond frustrating. So there are only 5 that like really blew me away and I did actually feel something from reading, which is so sad, but that's just the way that it worked out. I'm praying that 2020 will be different. My worst books of the year will be coming because I did have a lot of those. It was just positive feelings that I was having a hard time connecting with. Also, a video that I've been considering doing but I want to know your feedback on. The idea is like 2019 review, not necessarily with statistics and everything, just like a review of my year, like personally and for my channel and different things like that. So if that's something that you guys would want to see, I just thought that I would put that out there. So let's start with the honorable mentions and then we'll get into the actual 5 books that were my favorite of the year. So the 5 books are in order of my favorite, but these are not going to be mentioned in any particular order. So the first one is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This was one of the books that did actually make me feel something, but it wasn't a perfect book to me. This was the year that I started to read adult romance, and I have really been enjoying it, specifically contemporary romances, so I am not crazy about the purely smutty ones. I also want to build a relationship with the characters. That's just my personal preference, not that there's anything wrong with the other, but this is what I prefer. And so I found that I really like Christina Lauren books and Jasmine Guillory. I also thoroughly enjoy Taylor Jenkins Reid, and in 2019 I read most of Christina Lauren's books, I believe, at least their adult contemporary romances. I did not read Autobiography or their Beautiful series, I think is what it's called, but this one was my favorite of the ones that I read from them. It's just so amazing and I really connected with it because this book made me feel understood, and I think that's what I loved about it so much, and I welled up at the end, but I didn't completely break down, and that is what would have made it a 5 out of 5 stars for me, I think. I'm really glad that I read this one. It is one of my favorite books, definitely my favorite adult contemporary, I think, or maybe my second favorite, but yeah, I loved this one. The next one I talked about a ton around the time that I read it, and that is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. This is a graphic novel. We're following these 2 characters named Josie and Deja. They work at this pumpkin patch together, and outside of work they're not really friends, they don't really talk, but throughout the night they're trying to set Josie up with this girl that he's had a crush on for a super long time, and it's their senior year, so this is the last year that they will be working together, and they just kind of want to make the most of the night and enjoy each other's company one last time because they're not sure that they'll ever see each other again. It's super cute, all of the fall feelings. It was so atmospheric, and it just, I loved the banter between the 2 main characters. It was just absolutely heartwarming, and I remember the day that I picked this up, I was not feeling great, and so this made me smile when I didn't think it was possible, and that's why it's on this list. The last one is Suicide Notes by Michael Thomas Ford. I talked about this one a lot after I read it too. This is about a boy named Jeff who wakes up on New Year's Day and he is in the hospital because the night previous he had attempted suicide, and he is now admitted into the hospital, and there's like a 45-day plan. He has to be there, he can't leave, but he doesn't think that he needs to be there. He doesn't think that there's anything wrong with what he did. He doesn't think that it's a problem and that he needs help for it. He doesn't really feel like he has depression or anything else that he feels like everybody is waiting for him to confess to having. And he is such a funny character. That's one of the things that I loved the most about this book, was the humor in it, because when it comes to things that deal too closely with something that I have been through or a feeling that I have felt, I tend to hate them just because I don't want to admit that that is real. I was worried that I would hate this book because it would resonate too much, which I feel like sounds weird. Like if it resonates too much, then somebody hates it. Like I feel like that doesn't really make sense to anyone but me, but it didn't. There was a good enough like barrier between reality and fiction. It still felt very real, but it wasn't too real for me to have to relive and re-experience everything. And I loved it. It was amazing. I think I maybe cried a couple times. I just loved it. So I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I gave Pumpkinheads a 5 out of 5 stars, and I gave Love in Other Words, I think 4.5 or 4.75 out of 5 stars. So I loved all of them. Now getting into my actual top favorite books. So the first one I don't own physically, and that is The Sweetest Kind of Poison by Katie Wismer. I read that in August, I think, and it quickly became my favorite poetry collection. I have reread it numerous times. It is so incredible. I love that it tells a story. It made me cry multiple times. It's a poetry collection about a toxic relationship, and so many of those things resonated with me and just kind of gave me a new perspective on certain things, and I loved it a lot. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I read it in like 10 minutes when I was waiting for a flight at the airport, and it was what I needed at the time. It was just exactly what I needed, and so I am so thankful that I read it, and I cannot wait to read anything else that she publishes in the future. It's just gonna be amazing. Number 4 on this list is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. I have a book talk up for this in case you were curious. This is a book that is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and we follow Harper, who has cerebral palsy, and then we follow Ren, who is the Beast in the Beast. I did that weird. The Beast in this story, and there's also a love triangle in here, and it's pretty low fantasy, and it's actually a pretty slow story, but it's a really quick read somehow. I quickly got attached to all of the characters in this, and I definitely cried at the end. I had Breathe by Love playing in the background at a specific part, and I just couldn't stop sobbing. So I think I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. At least that's what I give it now, if that wasn't my original rating. I thought about this a lot. I read it super quickly, and it was so hard for me to put down. Yeah, I loved this book so freaking much, and if you want to hear more of my thoughts on it, then you can definitely go watch my book talk for it. I'll have it linked. I read this in February of last year, and it stuck with me through the entire year. The next one is another one that I talked about a ton at the time that I read it, and that is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is an older book, and it took me a really long time to actually pick this up because I had no intention of picking it up. Every time I heard the synopsis, it was not something that I thought that I would be interested in, and one day at the bookstore, I've told this story so many times, one day when I was at the bookstore, I had no idea what I wanted to read. I knew I wanted to read something, but there was nothing on my bookshelves that I wanted to read, and I couldn't find anything on the shelves of the store that I wanted to read, and I picked this up, and I was like, you know what? Everyone loves this. I'm going to give the first chapter a try. That's it. If I'm not connected, that's it. Like, I'm not reading it. We'll just see, though. We'll see. I was not expecting anything. So I read the first chapter, and it's told in dual perspectives. And so I read the first chapter and I was like, okay, that was really good. Like, I kind of care about these characters already. And then I was like, okay, well, I have to read the other perspective and see, like, if it's any good. And I fell in love with Elias. He quickly became one of the characters that I care about the most in the entire fictitious world. And so I immediately bought the book, was reading it in a drive-through, which is not good. Don't do that. I was the one driving. Let's make that clear. That is why it's bad. Reading it through the drive-through because I couldn't put it down, wanting to read it while I was actually driving home and had to physically, like, no, Erin, you cannot do that. That is incredibly dangerous. And then as soon as I got home, I read it. I read this so quickly. I did not want to put it down. I fell in love. I absolutely love these characters, and I still haven't read A Reaper at the Gates. It's a problem, but this one completely took me by surprise, which is why I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I think that I love it so much was because I was expecting absolutely nothing, and so with such little or such low expectations, it just completely blew me away because it's already an amazing book. Next is one that I actually haven't talked about on my channel at all yet because I haven't filmed my December wrap-up, but it's Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I listened to this one on audiobook. I was at Universal Harry Potter World, where you should be really invested, right? Like, Harry Potter World is amazing, especially for someone who, like, grew up with Harry Potter and, like, loves it. I was listening to the audiobook instead of paying attention. And anytime my family would try and talk to me, I was like, shh, I have to know what's happening. Excuse me. Like, I wanted to listen to this while I was on rides. This was all I wanted to do. I love Elizabeth, I love Nathaniel, but more than anything, I love Silas. There were so many amazing quotes in here, and I just want to reread it and annotate it because, like I said, I read this on audiobook, and so I didn't have the physical version with me because I was on vacation. But this one, again, was one that I had zero expectations for, and it completely took me by surprise. But I loved it. I loved the magic system and all of the plot twists, and it was so good. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars, obviously. Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. Last but not least, actually, it is my favorite book of 2019, and if you've been keeping up, then you probably know what the book is. If you think you know, I genuinely want you to pause the video and guess in the comments below, and I want to see how many of you get it right, because I didn't shut up about this book. Anytime I had an opportunity to talk about this, I did. So, put your guesses down below. And it's really funny because it's actually the lowest rated on this list, but it was still my favorite. Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. If you didn't think that this would be on this list at all, hello, welcome. This is one of my favorite books of all time. Definitely my favorite book that I read last year. This is a science fiction horror novel, which is not a genre that I read from, so it completely took me by surprise, about killer mermaids. And oh man, it's amazing. It's about this group of scientists that go on this ship to find out information about mermaids that they think are real, because I believe it's like 7 years before the book takes place. This other crew went out to film a mockumentary on mermaids, and no one on the crew survived, and the ship turned up completely wrecked on an island. No bodies were found, nothing. Very little footage remained from what the crew had gathered, and so now, 7 years later, another group of scientists are going out, but to actually study, because they really genuinely believe that there are mermaids out there. They're not telling anyone about this, and all of the research that they get to do is their own. And it was intense. I loved this, but even more than the action, I loved the science in this book, and I loved it all. Can you tell? I have so many freaking tabs in this book. I want to reread it. It took me so long to read this book, but I loved every second of it. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is not by any means a perfect book, but it is definitely one of my favorites. I love it. I love it so much. Oh, just thinking about it gives me chills. This is a book that anyone in my life, I just make them read it. Because it's that good and I want everyone to read it. Maybe I'm gonna reread it. Something else that this book did that I really was impressed by was there were characters that I did not like at all, and I still felt empathy for each of their situations all the time. Like even the mermaids, like I was feeling bad for them, and I want a sequel to this book so bad. More than anything, I want a sequel. Oh my god, I get so heated. I want a sequel so bad because it sets up for one. Anyway, if I talk any more about this, we'll be here forever because I love this book. But this was my favorite book of 2019. My sister-in-law is probably not impressed with that, but I love this book. Those were my top 5 favorite books of 2019 and the honorable mentions. I hope that you guys had a great reading year quality wise and are pleased with everything that happened. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if I have convinced you to. I would be so proud of myself. But yeah, I hope that you're doing well reading, mentally, and otherwise. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I really hope to see you all in my next one. Bye guys!